Hey everyone, it's Brett here with the Tuning School, and today I'm here with PK from Hamburger Superchargers because we're going to be installing a supercharger on our Jeep project. Now before we get started with the install, PK, do you want to tell everyone at home a little bit about Hamburger, what you guys do, and what kind of superchargers you have to offer?
Mostly we're trying to convey that Hamburgers has been around since the 70s. We've had a bunch of great companies from SLP, which a lot of people know, and we're back into the aftermarket performance. We also build the 1,000 horsepower Yenko Corvettes and Camaros. So we know all about horsepower, and Ed's been doing it since the 70s. And our setups are phenomenal. They're 50 state legal, extremely drivable. They're very quiet, and our hashtag no whining and 50 state legal is our key route to go.
That's awesome. So one of those superchargers is what we're going to be installing on the Jeep today. So for Jeep people out there that are looking at adding power to their Jeep, what are the benefits of adding a supercharger like this one?
Our setups are, like I said, we're 50 state legal, and the drivability is phenomenal. A lot of problems with the other kits out there is that the tuning's not right, it doesn't shift right. Once you're doing tire size, basically most supercharger companies, they're like a light switch. So it just comes on and it's too much too soon if you're pulling out in the traffic, in the rain, that kind of thing. And basically, I've gone all over the country letting people drive our kits, and the number one thing that any shop says, it's the funnest kit that they have ever driven because of the drivability, and that's where our focus is.
Well, it sounds like that's perfect for Jeeps because I don't know many Jeeps that are going down the drag strip, in a quarter mile trying to pop off the fastest time they can. They typically are going to and from soccer practice, going to the mall, going shopping, so that drivability is a main feature, I imagine, for the Jeep guys at home.
Yep, absolutely. And the other thing too is our superchargers are dead quiet. They make almost no noise, so you're not waking up people in the middle of the night with it whining under the hood. So just overall, it's just a flat out fun kit to drive.
That's awesome. So once this install's wrapped up and we actually throw this thing on the rollers, what kind of power increase can we expect to see with this supercharger?
We do all our setups like the factory where we do engine horsepower. There's so many variations between dynos, climate, all that stuff. So we quote engine horsepower. So it's 400 horse, 400 torque. On average, it's about 340 at the tire for all the the rear wheel people setups. But it just overall 400 horse, 400 torque.
So that makes a lot of sense reading it at the engine because I imagine the Jeep community, when you start talking about big tires, axles, gears and stuff, a lot of the Jeep guys will see very varying power numbers because of the different suspension modifications they're doing. So that makes a lot of sense you guys read it off the engine.
Yeah, absolutely. It just, the variances are too broad to where, we want to make sure all of our stuff is repeatable. The great thing about our kits is that once we send out the factory tune, it's repeatable everywhere. So that's why we focus on just the engine horsepower, and then tire size and all that. That really just comes into play on your rear wheel tire numbers. So
awesome, very cool. So while we're working on installing this, do you have any tips for the guys at home or shops that are maybe watching this for actually installing one of these kits? What's the number one takeaway for doing the install properly?
The major number one takeaway is to follow the instructions. We spend a great amount of time to make sure that everything is covered when you're doing the install to make it as simple as possible. And since our kits don't require a bunch of cutting up of the vehicle, we make it a great install, and you can always go back to stock if you want to get rid of it.
How you doing? My name is Jonathan Becker. I'm with Hamburger Superchargers. Today we're going to be installing a supercharger kit on this Jeep JK. To start, we're going to pull off the front bumper, we're going to pull off the stock intake system, we're going to pull off the intake manifold, and we're going to swap the injectors and spark plugs. Right now we're just taking off all the brackets that they have holding the intake manifold down. This is necessary because we have to change the spark plugs, we have to change the injectors. We run a colder heat range spark plug to reduce knock, and a higher flow injector to increase fueling. That's about the only reason you have to take the intake manifold off. And it's all for this side of the motor, just because everything is underneath the intake on this side. Right now we're pulling off the fuel rail so we can swap the injectors out. So right now we're just prepping the injectors to put them back in the fuel rail. Once we do that, we can put the fuel rail back in the car and then reinstall the intake manifold and wrap that up. So right now we're going to be installing the alternator on the new alternator brackets. After that, we're going to extend the wires to reach the new alternator location, and then we can install the supercharger. All right, so now we're moving on to everybody's favorite part, and that's installing the supercharger head unit. So now that the supercharger is installed, we're going to move to the front of the vehicle and start the intercooler. But first, we're going to put on the supercharger outlet tube so we know where to position the intercooler. We just finished installing the supercharger oil cooler. We're going to move on to the rest of the oil cooling loop, which consists of a reservoir and a filter and some plumbing to hook everything up. After that, we're going to modify the bottom of the stock air box. We can put that back in. We can put the supercharger intake on, and we have some miscellaneous plumbing to do for the recirculation valve, and we're actually pretty close to wrapping up. So what we're doing here is one of the last steps of the supercharger install. It's also one of the most important, is the supercharger oil bleed procedure. What we've already done is we've filled the oil reservoir, and we're going to apply some slight shop air to the top of the reservoir using nothing more than a shop air gun and a rag to create a seal on the inlet. We have the banjo fitting on the supercharger cracked loose. So as we apply pressure here, we're going to see some fluid come out of the fitting there, and we're going to tighten up that fitting, and that's all you have to do. We have some oil. A little too much pressure there, but it's not going to hurt anything.
This has been a blast. Thank you so much to PK and to Hamburger Superchargers for helping us choose and install this supercharger on our Jeep. For more information on Hamburger Superchargers and the kits they have to offer, check them out at hamburgersuperchargers.com. Bye for now.